All right, Weekend Warriors, very happy to have a very special guest here on tonight. We have Frank Ammirante. He's the writer for the Game Day. Frank, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
What's up? It's an honor to be on the show and talking football with you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So, hey, before we get into this segment, this is a great time for, Frank. He's very active on Twitter. I suggest you follow him. And he has a lot of good takes season long, gambling tweets, some things I've tailed and done very well on. I want to give him one shout out for something. I think he's had an excellent call on so far this season. He had Saquon Barkley ranked as his running back 3. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is. I went really aggressively on him just because he has that archetype of what you look for, that skill set of like a player that you look for a high ceiling toward the end of the first, early second round, because he was slated for a ton of touches. He's great in the receiving game. He's explosive, and the Giants' receiving room was limited, so it's like they got to feed Barkley if they have any chance. And I was confident in the new coaching staff with Brian Dable, so I just went out on a limb, and I'm like, you know what? This is a bounce back year for him. I'm going to go really heavy on him. I know it sounds bold to rank him RB3, but if everything breaks right, he's got huge upside. So I just went that route, and it's looking good so far.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm huge on that, like looking into things like that, because you look at these 15 years ago, nobody had access to like some of the information that other people had access to. Now everybody has all the information. So I see a benefit in, don't go with the ESPN or the CBS rankings. You got to find writers like yourself, other kind of niche areas that, may have a leg up on some of the competition. So I did get Saquon in one of my leagues, not my main league, but I did get him in one of my leagues, and I'm doing well in that league. So I appreciate that insight.
I'm glad. That's my favorite, helping out other players, and happy to hear it.
Yeah. So maybe I should regret bringing you on the show because other people are going to get some insight from you. But I do want to share some things. So one of the segments that we say we would do today with Frank is, kind of call it mid-season sleepers. And, a lot changes after 6 weeks. It's almost like a whole new playing field. So with that, one of the things I'm going to challenge Frank with is some guys he thinks rest this season that maybe have started slow that might, now be turning the corner and can produce really well for your fantasy team. So Frank, I'll give you the floor to maybe share someone or a couple guys that you think that could be candidates for that.
Well, I'll start with an easy one in that he's just returning from suspension, and it's DeAndre Hopkins. Unfortunately, Marquise Brown now out up to 6 weeks. Huge target opportunity for Hopkins. Obviously, he has a strong track record. I know that people are like, hey, maybe he's showing signs of decline last year because he slowed down in efficiency. But let's remember, he did play hurt at moments of that year. Like, he was suiting up, but he was not 100%, and that probably affected his play. The Cardinals play at a fast pace. They run a lot of plays. So the opportunity, the volume is there. Maybe whoever rosters him in your league, they took him knowing that they're optimistic and they'll wait out the 6 weeks. But maybe you can still try to trade for him and maybe swing off maybe a player who, like a Deontay Johnson, let's say, who has similar strong track record, but seems to not be the same this year in terms of rapport with Kenny Pickett. And, George Pickens, I think, is starting to really show out over there. So that could be a move you can make, I would say, even though on paper coming into the year, you're like, no, I would never do that. But what we've seen is Deontay Johnson doesn't seem like one of those years that we saw the last 2 for him. Another one, a more deeper pick who you may be able to pick up off your free agency is Wan'Dale Robinson. Limited action last week, but he showed his skills. He's undersized, but he could really go to work in those underneath targets. He had over 30 yards and a touchdown. I think he only played like 30% of the snaps. You got to think his role will grow. That's a really limited receiver room. He could, be that slot receiver that gets filled with targets and has a nice floor, especially in full PPR. So those are 2 receivers. I can go on to running back. One running back I really like to still try to get at a reasonable price is Travis Etienne. That's just because James Robinson came into the year, exceeded all my expectations. I thought he'd start slow coming off the torn Achilles, but he was doing great. But now you're starting to see the changing of the guard there, as Etienne has outplayed Robinson the last 2 weeks. I believe he's gotten 100 yards from scrimmage in consecutive games. He's more of a dynamic back who can make an impact in the passing game. So that's a player you could be able to trade for and not give up too much. You may be able to give up the guy who I want to go away from next. That's David Montgomery, just because that Bears offense is a dumpster fire. You know, Khalil Herbert has looked great in his own right. The coaching staff has talked about how they have to, ride the hot hand a bit. So maybe you can swing a Montgomery and throw in a smaller piece to get an Etienne, even though Montgomery has outperformed Etienne from fantasy production so far. I think rest of season Etienne would be the better bet there.
Sure. And that's a great point. I mean, James Robinson in our home league was a guy who started out hot and then got traded to a manager. Maybe that manager cut bait at the right time, but Etienne has certainly been coming on. And I'm happy to hear you say Wandale, because I literally picked him up today in my home league. So, I did see everybody's always looking for, that guy who can not be Odell Beckham Jr., but maybe be 40% of what Odell Beckham Jr. was in his rookie season and pick up that player. And, you never know who that's going to be until it happens. So I like taking a chance on some of those guys.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, coming into the year, a lot of respected, industry people, writers, content creators they're excited about Kadarius Toney because he showed flashes and there was the opportunity there. There's a severely limited receiver room. But it seems that the new coaching staff, part of it is probably injuries, but part of it is probably like there's something going on there, because, hey, we didn't think Toney had this serious injury coming in. Like, we thought he'd be week to week, but he hasn't played. Something's fishy there. Maybe it's like they want to trade him, but Wandale is one of their guys. They drafted him in the second round. It's a new regime. They're going to give him every opportunity to succeed. And hey, that's a well-coached team. They're overachieving at 5-1, but they do things right that just cause them to be in games and pull off these upsets. They knocked me out of Survivor 2 weeks in a row. I'm tilting on that, but I'm like, no, the Giants aren't going to go 5-1, but they keep surprising us. I'm optimistic on Wandale the rest of the year.
Well, faith in coaching staffs, not to get on a tangent, but have trust in Dable. You can see it on the Hackett's of the world. And I know he might not be totally, it's not fair maybe to judge him through 7 weeks, but totally just falling on his face, as opposed to a team I root for, the Minnesota Vikings. KOC, he comes in and, they have one bad loss to the Eagles, but otherwise have worked pretty well. So you got to have faith in some of the coaching staffs to figure it out. But so segue, you mentioned Montgomery. Are there any other guys you're trying to potentially cut bait with that have started hot, or you may think, might be down for a downtick here?
Another one that you could maybe try to trade, just looking at my list here. Let me see here. There's players who are outperforming expectations like Alan Lazard, but I think I would, if you can maybe swing off a trade where you get, say, let's say DeAndre Hopkins for Alan Lazard. I like Lazard, but he's producing at wide receiver 18 in points per game. Who knows? Maybe the Packers trade for Claypool and add in another target there, which could potentially affect Lazard's production. So that could be a move you might swing, like a Lazard for Hopkins. Not that I'm so pessimistic on Lazard's outlook the rest of the year, but that may be a move worth exploring.
Sure.
Another one, maybe Cortland Sutton. You can try to get off of him. He looks good. It's just like you said, though, Nathaniel Hackett just does not seem to be that team's totally out of sync. What a disappointment. Russell Wilson's banged up too. What if he has to miss a game or two, and then you're starting Sutton with Brett Ripien at quarterback? That'll hurt. Yeah. So maybe you can, use Sutton's early production where he's been like a wide receiver 3, but he's shown flashes here and there, and try to move off him.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
I'll throw out one guy, maybe I should have mentioned in the first category, but two guys underperformers that I think from the quarterback standpoint. I was looking at some red zone efficiency stuff, some first down efficiency stuff, and I think Herbert and Brady both are guys that are gonna have a better second half. Both of their schedules look better. Herbert's getting Allen back, which will help. Brady's finally got his receiver. So the quarterback position as a whole has been very bad this season. And I think those two guys in particular, and maybe Murray, to your point with Hopkins, will turn the corner as well. So I think there's maybe some optimism at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I love that call. First of all, Brady's getting his pieces all back. You know, even though they had that ugly game against Pittsburgh, they still haven't fully gotten going. But yeah, he's a great buy low because Godwin's starting to look good again, looking like himself. The weapons are still strong with Evans, Godwin, Fournette. So I like that. And I love the Herbert call starting this week. Like you said, Keenan Allen is back. If you look at implied team totals, the Chargers are 28.75. That's like a full point and a half more than second most. Like they're just way ahead in projections in terms of scoring this week. And of course, Herbert was likely limited by the ribs. You know, now having an underneath target like Keenan Allen, who constantly gets open, is going to probably really help that offense, especially because we saw Herbert consistently, you know, checking it down to Eckler and even Josh Palmer last game. So he needs that another stud like that, like a Keenan Allen that will really help out this offense. Love that call. And Kyler Murray as well. He's averaging like, I believe, below 6 yards per attempt, which is not only would be among the worst in the league, but it's way below his career norms. He's usually 7.5, high sevens. Like you can't really expect that to stick. I mean, especially with Hopkins, probably tonight he'll have a strong game, if I may say. Like Marshawn Lattimore out for the Saints. Joe Burrow just picked them apart. We could see that from Murray finding Hopkins early and often tonight.
Yeah, I could see that as well. So one thing I will say, you know, we're talking about season long stuff. Sometimes I like to live week to week. And I talked to you about maybe throwing some DFS guys out there, just maybe gut calls on some guys, particularly this week, who you see have a good matchup. Because quite frankly, you know, we're talking about projections 3 weeks from now, the whole deck could be reshuffled again. So who do you particularly are you bullish on this week that some managers would like to hear?
Well, I'll stick with deeper players just because if I say, like, for example, I absolutely love Josh Jacobs this week if you're playing DFS, but obviously in season long, you're going to be starting him. But he's playing a Houston run defense that ranks 29th in rush DVOA, allowing the most fantasy points per game to running backs. The Raiders are 7-point favorites, so they're projected to play with the lead, which means more rush attempts. And they have an implied total of 26.5 points. So they're projected to score a fair share amount. I am so high on him. I think I'm going to rank him RB2 this week. I think he's going to go off. But obviously in your league, someone is starting him every week. So let's dig a little deeper. One we could say is Kenyon Drake. He looked really efficient last week, over 100 yards on like 11 carries. J.K. Dobbins has missed practice Wednesday and today. So that doesn't sound good. And if Gus Edwards, I mean, even if he plays, he'll be probably limited. So you got to think Drake is the 1A, at least for this week. And he takes on a Browns defense that ranks 30th in rush DVOA and 30th in fantasy points per game allowed to running backs. And again, here, the game script sets up nicely because the Ravens are 6-point home favorites. 26 plus implied point total. So they're projected to play with the lead and projected to score. That's what we like to see.
Yeah.
And Drake's efficient. So
I'm going to pause you there for a second because I just picked up Drake in our league and I have Drake, Dillon against Washington, who's been absolutely horrible, and Brian Robinson in that same game. So assuming that Dobbins is out, and even if Justice Hill is up, puts you on the spot. If you got to start 2 out of those 3, who are you starting?
Yeah, this one is close. Dillon looks like one of my swings and misses so far. I did like him coming into the year. Brian Robinson, I think I'm going to go. Okay, so I'm going with Dillon for one, just because he still gets some usage in the passing game. I'm still optimistic on his talent. even though I'm going to take Washington plus 4.5, the fact is that Green Bay should win this game. It's just, I think Washington will keep it close.
Okay.
And, they got a 23.5 point implied total. They should have more opportunities in the red zone, Dylan, that is. Whereas Brian Robinson, I know he got in the end zone last week, but he just hasn't really looked efficient, even though his matchup is definitely better on paper. Like the Packers are 32nd in run DVOA, whereas Washington is 5th. It's just that I think Green Bay will be able to move the ball through the air, opening up room for Dylan. And Brian Robinson, hey, Ron Rivera has said now all of a sudden they need to get Gibson a little more involved. And then you add in McKissick, that swings it to Dylan for me. Now, thinking about Drake, it's just that the Ravens are a much better offense than Washington. Drake has shown more explosiveness than Robinson has. Like Drake can make longer runs, whereas Robinson's more of that like churning out yardage, power back, 4 yards here and a cloud of dust kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go Drake and Dylan for you there.
Okay. I appreciate that advice. And I'll be honest with you, I think Robinson, you're not happy unless he scores because he's not going to give you any catches.
Yeah, that's the
So,
risk.
It's either 60 yards and no touchdowns or 60 yards and a touchdown. So there's a big risk.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, let me ask you this, Frank, and I'm not going to keep you much longer, but so any other gambling tips? I saw you tweeted some stuff out of some stuff you like tonight. I don't know if you want to mention that, or maybe you like something particular on Sunday. I got a group full of gamblers that watch this show. As I mentioned to you, I'm 9-3 on the season, so they're loving me. I had a guest on earlier. They're 0-1 earlier in the season. So you can right the ship here with some picks.
All right, let's right the ship. The thing is, I don't know I like the props, but Sundays hasn't come out, so I'm gonna focus a little more on tonight, but I'll give some spread picks that I like for Sunday. I'll do a bunch for tonight. I like Chris Olave under 60. I think it was 63.5 receiving yards because Arizona's done well against opposing wide receiver ones. They slowed down DK Metcalf. They slowed down AJ Brown. They even slowed down Cooper Kupp. He only had 40 receiving yards that game. And the fact that Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry are out, they could really just fully devote attention to Olave, which could be, lead to an inefficient game. Of course, it could mean that he gets a lot of targets, but, at least we have a relatively high bar, 63.5. We can get there if he goes like 6 for 58. Another one I like is Taysom Hill under 33 rushing yards, just because I know he's been going over that, but like he's gone like one game 4 carries for 81 yards. The game where he scored 3 touchdowns, I think he had like 8 or 10 My point is, it's just ridiculous efficiency. Like, how long is this going to last that this quarterback or Swiss Army knife, whatever you want to call him, out of a wildcat, if you want to call it that, is going to churn out these huge runs?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm banking against that. And then the other one, DeAndre Hopkins over 61.5. I think on FanDuel, it's now 63.5 because Marshawn Lattimore is out and he could really have his way with an exploitable pass defense that I just had the stat. Oh, they're 21st in pass DVOA and they're 26th in fantasy points per game allowed to receivers. So that's good. Those are my Thursday night. And I even did the under just because these Thursday nighters seem to always be ugly. I'm just going to swing with that.
That's my pick this week. I got 2 picks every week. That's one of the picks I gave, under 43.5. So
nice.
We're on the same page there. So
hey, you're 9-3, and if I'm on the same page as you, I'm happy because I've been hit or miss this year. So
far. Okay.
But for Sunday, there's a couple. I wrote in a parlay article at and so I have a few picks there, and one of them was I like Washington to cover just because, Green Bay has just shown no ability to cover these larger spreads. They were 7.5 point favorites against the Jets. They lose outright. Same thing against the Giants. They lose outright. They were 10.5 point favorites against the Patriots. They had to go to overtime and win by a field goal. So it's hard to really respect them to lay 5 or 4.5 there. So I like Washington. Another one is the Texans +7, just because they've been really good against the spread too. Like their max loss has been by 10 points. and they only lost by 7 to Denver. They tied the Colts. So they're kind of that scrappy, ugly, bad team that could put a scare in opponents. And the Raiders, Darren Waller looks like he's going to be out. And even Hunter Renfrow missed practice today. So that's not a good sign. And, they're 1-4. The Texans are 1-3-1. So the point is that it's a little bit high. So considering how Houston has played, and I'll add one more spread. The Browns plus 6.5 against the Ravens. Again, just because the Ravens have just shown they continue to blow leads. Look at them against the Giants. Look at them against the Dolphins. They even blew it against the Bills.
Yeah.
It's a division game. The Browns have a great offensive line. They can just churn out chunk yardage on the ground with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They're a well-coached team. Like, they could keep this one close, bottom line. So I'll take that too. I gave you a lot of picks, but hey, let's see how it goes.
I like volume picks. It's all good. Listen, I hit most of the games on Sunday. It's just how heavy I hit them. So I appreciate those picks. My other pick, just for the record, like I said, I give one Thursday night. I give one other pick. I took the Niners plus 3. I think it might be down to 2.5, but Kansas City, I know they're coming off a loss and they need to win, but the Niners are tough, especially at home. Talk about another well-coached team, and they can't stop the run. So I think a team that like the Niners can play good defense, keep Mahomes in check, and win, or even if they don't win, lose a close game. So
yeah, I could see that.
All right. Well, hey man, this has been awesome. Before I let you go, I know you said you do a podcast. Is there anything you want to drop there for some people that would like to listen?
Yes, so I have a fantasy football podcast with a friend of mine. The account's called The Fantasy Jones. So every week we do an episode where we go through each game, and I'll talk about a few notable fantasy players for a fantasy matchups. Also, maybe throw out a spread pick, who I think is going to win the game, how it may go. Any pertinent little tidbits within each game that we like to do. So you could check us out there. You could check my rankings at thegameday.com. I also have parlay picks. And like you said, I post a lot on Twitter. I love to throw out some takes, some insights. Some people get annoyed because I, post a lot, but it is, I like talking football. That's the way it goes. So
Sure.
Hit me up there, and that's it.
And listen, with as many takes as we all have, it's impossible to be 100% correct. That's one thing you
Yeah.
learn very quickly. So, as long as I live by the credo, process over results. If the process was sound and you had a good reason for making it, it didn't work out for you, hopefully you keep that process going, and the next day will be better. Plus, we live here in New Jersey, close to Philadelphia. Trust the process is a big credo of ours.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and great talking football with you, and good luck with your picks.
Yeah, thanks. Good luck to you too, and good luck in this big home league.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
No problem.